Students, today we will discuss the first chapter in the syllabus of class 9 chemistry. The name of the chapter is Matter in Our Surroundings. Now, before we discuss the basic concepts in this chapter, like what is matter, what are the different forms of matter, let me show you a basic concept map that will help you to understand what we will be studying next. So, this is the basic concept map of this lesson. So, you can see that matter forms the basic core of the topic, and we can study the interrelated topics one by one. You can see how matter has been classified into different forms and how all these different states of matter are related to one another. So basically in this lesson we will be studying about matter, what is the important properties, what a matter form of matter exhibits, how we can bring about a change in the different states in which matter exists in nature. So, we'll be discussing all these things in detail in this lesson. So, very quickly, we can switch over to the first main concept that we'll be beginning this lesson with, and that is what do we mean by matter? As we look at our surroundings, we see a large variety of things with different shapes, sizes, and textures. Everything in this universe is made up of a material which scientists have named matter. So, right from the air that we breathe, the food we eat, any object that is surrounding us, say the clouds, the trees, the stones, the plants, the animals, a small droplet of water or a particle of sand. Everything is matter. So, to understand this concept of matter more clearly, let me show you some pictures. Like in the adjoining picture, you can see a rocking chair. Now, this is a very common object that each one of us are having in our homes. What do you see now? Flowing water. Water, as we all know, is so crucial for existence of any form of life. Now you can see a burning incense stick. Like whenever we burn an incense stick, the fragrance coming out of it fills up the entire room and gives us such a pleasing feeling. And what do you see now? Smoke coming out from the chimney of a factory. Even this is a very common sight in most of the big cities where there are so many factories and industries, and very commonly we can see a huge amount of smoke coming out of the chimney. Now, let me ask you one question. Does any similarity exist between all these different objects like a chair, the flowing water, the smoke that is coming out from the incense stick, and now the smoke that is coming out from the chimney? What common things does these, what common properties do these things have? Obviously, each one of these have some mass. We can feel their presence, we can experience them through our senses, and most importantly, we need some space to fill them up. Like you require some space to put up a chair, you require some space to fill in water, like whenever water is put inside any conductor, any container, sorry, it will fill in some space. And obviously, air, it fills up so much space, like air is filling up our entire room. So, any form of matter has these three basic properties. Now, we can define matter as anything that occupies space, has mass, and is felt by senses is called matter. I repeat once again, anything that occupies space, has mass, and is felt by senses is called matter. Now, you might wonder that how this entire concept of matter came into existence. Now, you will be surprised to know that even Indian philosophers tried to give a lot of information regarding matter. What they actually thought that every substance, every object is actually made up of five basic elements. Would you like to know what are these five basic elements? Now, these are the basic five elements: air, fire, water, earth, and sky, that you can see in the picture as ether, or as we know that in Hindi it is called Akash. So, Akash, Vayu, Agni, Jal, Prithvi. These are the five elements, basic elements, what Indian philosophers thought to be the main constituents of any form of matter. Do you know what they called them? They called them Panch Tattva. Panch means five, Tattva means elements. So, five elements. Panch Tattva. Now, an important thing that we need to study next is what are the characteristics of matter. Now, since a long time, two schools of thought prevailed regarding the nature of matter. Like one group of scientists believe that matter is continuous like a block of wood, whereas the other thought that matter was made up of particles like sand. With the help of some simple observations, some simple activities, we can understand which theory is more appropriate regarding matter. But prior to that, we need to understand what are the basic characteristics of matter. First, the particles of matter are very small. They are so small that they cannot be seen through our naked eyes. They are extremely small in size. Second, the particles of matter have space between them. Now, the amount of space existing between the particles of different forms of matter is different. That we'll be studying a bit later. But for the time being, we can understand that interparticle space exists between the particles of matter. Third, the particles of matter are continuously moving. Now, one thing I would like to tell you at this moment, that anything in motion has got energy, and the form of energy existing in particles in the state of motion is called kinetic energy. So, the kinetic energy present in the particles of matter does vary. The amount of kinetic energy does vary. It depends whether the particles are free to move or not. But motion is not merely changing the position, it may be in the form of vibration. So, even in that way, the particles might be moving. So, any form of matter, you will find this property that the particles are continuously moving depending upon the amount of energy present in them. Last property, the particles of matter apply force on each other. There a force of attraction exists between the particles. Now, whenever we talk about stability of particles, stability of any form of matter, this particular property is playing the most important role. Unless an attractive force exists between the particles, how can we even think about any form of matter being stable? So, to hold the particles together, a force of attraction is so important. So, an important property, an important characteristic regarding matter is that the particles of matter apply force on each other. So, all these properties can be proved through very simple activities that we will be discussing next. The particles of matter are very tiny or very small. In order to understand this property of matter, let us conduct a simple activity. We will dissolve 2 to 3 crystals of potassium permanganate in 100 milliliter of water in a beaker. Now, as we all know that potassium permanganate gives a characteristic deep purple color to water. As soon as these crystals dissolve in water, the color of water will change to deep purple, as you can see in the picture. Now we will take 10 milliliter of this prepared mixture and pour it in the second beaker containing 100 milliliter of water, as you can see in this picture. Now once a new mixture has been prepared, we will take out 10 milliliter from this solution and again prepare a new mixture with 100 milliliter of water. We will repeat this process 5 to 6 times. Ultimately, the last beaker, we will see that the color has faded to a large extent because we have diluted the mixture so many times. But still, the color that was imparted to water by the crystals of potassium permanganate does exist to some extent. This activity shows that potassium permanganate, a crystal of potassium permanganate, might be made up of millions of tiny particles which still remain associated with water, and that's why it has been possible to retain the color. A similar activity can be conducted using any antiseptic liquid. You know, any antiseptic liquid has got a strong odor, a strong smell. If you dissolve, say, a few drops of that liquid in water and you smell it, you can smell the strong odor of that antiseptic. You go on diluting it. Even after repeated dilutions, you will find that still that strong odor of the antiseptic liquid can be sensed. So this means that this property is true for any form of matter. Any form of matter is made up of very, very small particles, microscopic size particles. Second property, the particles of matter have space between them. For this, a very common observation that we come across almost every single day. If we have a glass of water and we are asked to dissolve a spoonful of salt or sugar in it, what will happen? Once that entire amount of salt or sugar has dissolved in water, will the level of water rise? Obviously not. Then the question arises, where has that salt or sugar disappeared? Does this word disappear actually hold true in this situation? No. That salt or sugar is very much present, dissolved in water. It has not disappeared. We are not able to see the particles of salt or sugar because they have filled in the space between the particles of water, and that's the reason why the level of water has not risen. So we can now understand that little amount of space does exist between particles of matter. In case of water, the space that is present between the particles has filled in the particles of salt or sugar. That's why the level of water did not rise. So the particles of matter have got space between them. I would like to remind you one more time that the amount of space does vary from form to form of matter. Like in one form of matter, the space might be a bit less, and in another form of matter, the interparticle space might be slightly more. The particles of matter are continuously moving. For this, we will take some water in a beaker and put a drop of blue or red ink slowly along the sides of the beaker. We have to leave it undisturbed for a few hours. The ink spreads evenly throughout the water due to the movement of the particles of water and ink. A similar observation was made even when we dissolved the crystals of potassium permanganate in water. Gradually, the color given out by the crystals of potassium permanganate will spread evenly inside water. This means the particles are continuously moving. Just imagine the fragrance of a burning incense stick. Even if the incense stick is burning in some other room, you are sitting in some other room, then you can still get that fragrance. Just remember the smell that is coming out from hot food, hot sizzling food. That aroma of hot sizzling food reaches us even through some distance. We are able to smell that aroma. So this is primarily due to the reason that the particles of matter are moving. Now I would like to tell you one thing, that the extent to which any particle present inside matter is going to move will depend upon the amount of energy present in it. The energy, what is it called? It is called kinetic energy. And kinetic energy is directly dependent upon temperature. So that's why the smell of hot food reaches us through a distance, but we are not able to smell the food if it is cold. So higher is the temperature, higher would be the kinetic energy, and higher would be the motion seen in the particles. So that's the reason why the particles start moving rapidly if the temperature is increased. So with increasing the temperature will increase kinetic energy. Lastly, the particles of matter apply force on each other. So for this we will consider an iron nail, a piece of chalk and a rubber band. We'll try breaking them by hammering, cutting or stretching. Now would it be easy to break all these objects? It is more easier to break the chalk, less easier to break the rubber band because it is stretchable, and difficult to break the iron nail. This is because the particles in the iron nail are held together with greater force. Now this attractive force does vary from object to object, and in this case, in this example, the force of attraction existing between the particles in iron is strong enough to hold them together, and that's why it is so difficult to break them into pieces. It is so convenient to break the piece of chalk because the particles are held together by a force of attraction, but it is not so strong. We can easily overcome it by applying some external force. So, the attractive force that is present between the particles of matter is solely responsible for holding them together, and as I was telling, that it is responsible for stability of any form of matter. So very quickly then I would like to sum up all the properties of matter. What are they? Particles of matter are very tiny, particles of matter have space between them, particles of matter are continuously moving, and the particles of matter attract each other. So we'll start discussing about the remaining concepts in our next session. I will end my session today at this point. Thank you.